Osio, can everyone hear me? Yes?
Yes.
Good? Okay, perfect. So Osio, hello. I am Jen Deerinwater. I'm a bisexual, two-spirit, multiply disabled citizen of the Cherokee Nation of Oklahoma. I am also a freelance journalist, and I am the founding executive director of Crushing Colonialism. So before we really get going here, and pardon me, I know I will forget things, so I will read from my notes. Before we get going, I wanted us to take a moment of silence to recognize the loss of one of our Indigiqueer relatives, Comanche and White Mountain Apache queer actor Jonathan Joss, who was murdered in both a hate crime and an act of genocide on June 1st, our first day of Pride Month. All right, thank you. And if you're like let's relax and try to calm down, maybe just do like a belly breath. Just you know, we're all here to have fun, but we're all here to also talk about some pretty deep and maybe some traumatic things. So, you know, we want everyone to take care of yourselves. If you need to get up and stretch, if you need to leave the room for a minute, please do so. And I'm also very humbled and thankful that you all chose to be here in this panel with us when you have so many amazing options at this conference. So just a little bit about Crushing Colonialism. We were founded in 2016 during the fight against the Dakota Access Pipeline at the Standing Rock Sioux Reservation in North Dakota. I formed this organization out of a great abundance of need for Indigenous created and supported storytelling and media. Our mission is to uplift and tell the stories of Indigenous people through media and traditional storytelling. We produce international reporting and organizing to inform and empower marginalized community members, create professional opportunities, and advocate for the just funding and employment of Native artists, media workers, and storytellers. In doing this, we control our narratives in order to crush colonialism. So before we get started, I also just wanted to briefly mention some events that we just had. So on May 30th and June 1st, we held our first, well, I don't know if I can say it was our first. It was our latest, our largest of the Decolonized Beats Indigenous WorldPride programming series. So DBIWP, as I call it for short, began in 2023 with a community event featuring local Indigenous women and Indigiqueer relatives held on Treaty 1 territory in so-called Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada. In 2024, we created an original album called Hope. This album featured Indigiqueer artists from around the world, one of whom is Rivolta down here. And it was produced by Native American Music, Produced by Native American Music Award nominee Tony Enos. It's available on Apple, Spotify, and our website, crushingcolonialism.org. We also had a film training for 4 Indigiqueer youth from around the world, led by the amazing Plains Cree filmmaker, Theo Cuthand. June 1st was the world premiere of the students' films, and we've worked very hard to keep our Indigiqueer people trained, engaged, paid, and supported at all stages of their lives and careers in storytelling. And this all leads us here today to this conversation with my fabulous relatives who also come from different places around the world. So how about we start here with Fabiana, just give a little introduction, each of you, and just tell us a little bit about some of the work that you're doing briefly, and how it relates to Indigiqueer storytelling.
Should I start? Okay. Bye, hello everyone. Thank you so much, Jen, for the introduction, and I'm just so honored to be here and having you all as my partners in this room. having my elders, my family, my relatives here around me. So thank you so much for having me. A little bit about me, I am Fabiana Gibim. I'm an Indigiqueer researcher, PhD candidate, and editor and founder of a press called Sob Influência Press, and the director of development and communications at Crushing Colonialism. So shout out Crushing Colonialism for putting us all together here. I also have my little, I'm cheating here. I'm from the Guarani-Kaiowá Indigenous nation on the border of Brazil and Paraguay, even though I also have relatives from ancestry from the Assyrian indigenous groups from the border of Syria. My research explores the concepts of sonic art in relation to vibration as an epistemology in indigenous radical imagination. In other words of these academic silly words, I defy the white-induced idea of hierarchy of sight, light, and conservative policy over indigenous vibrational world-making, sound and transformation. My work relates to indigenous storytelling in many ways. First, my work at Crushing Colonialism, that is an organization dedicated to uplift and honor indigenous storytelling from all over the world, as you can see among us here. Followed by my work as an editor and publisher, having published more than 50 works of indigenous, Black, and multi-ethnic radical philosophy and arts, as well as my PhD research that has been creating a living archive of indigenous vibrational world-making through sound and epistemologies. And that's it pretty much about me. Thank you for being here. I'm gonna pass to Elton now.
Thank you, Fabiana. It's very great to meet you as well this morning. But yadriya bine sheya Elton Naswood she tohanen she tabaha bashishi nakaidene ida she tatnezaki ida shinala yadine inshle. What I said is good morning. My name is Elton Naswood. I am of the Near to the Water clan, born for the Edgewater clan. My maternal grandfather's clans of the Mexican people and my paternal grandfather's clans of the Tango people. This is how I am Navajo. So I was taught at a young age to introduce myself in that way when I'm speaking amongst a group of people. First and foremost, to identify myself to the Creator. Secondly, to identify myself to others in the room. And thirdly, most importantly, other Native people who may be in the room. And more specifically, other Navajos who may be in the room. As I like to tell my non-Native relatives, clanships are kind of like American last names, right? When we're born, we take our father's last name predominantly. When marriage happens, they predominantly take a husband's last name. That's because in the US, we live in a patrilineal society, right? But for me as a Navajo person, I live in a matrilineal society, and so I honor my mother, my grandmother, my great-grandmother, and the female lineage of who I am today by expressing my clanships. So I am Elton Naswood, is my given name. I am a member of the Navajo Nation. I currently am the executive director of an inaugural nonprofit organization called the Two-Spirit and Native LGBTQ Center for Equity, Two-Spirit Center for short. It's a new organization that was founded less than a year ago. It was a grassroots organization that was developed to address the needs of Native LGBTQ individuals, but also Two-Spirit individuals here in the US. Our vision is to become the training and technical assistance agency nationally to work with our tribal communities, but also organizations that serve our Two-Spirit Native LGBTQ communities as well. And I'm also gonna share a little bit more personally about me to go along with the theme of storytelling, is that I also have an alter ego. No, it's not Elton John, that's the other diva, but it's Eartha Quake. So I have a drag persona. We have an indigenous drag community here in the US that is growing, and so I am a part of the House of Indigenous Barbie in Denver, Colorado. And some of my performances and the regalia that we wear, the outfits that we wear, are a part of this indigenous culture that we like to share through the performance of drag. So you'll get to meet Eartha, not in person at this conference, but maybe later. But very happy to be here to share my experience as a Native gay Two-Spirit Nugway individual. Just real quickly before we go on, how many of you have heard the term Two-Spirit?
Oh, wow, look at that.
Yes, wonderful community. 'Cause most times I have to do a 101, but knowing that we have a room of people who know what the Two-Spirit term is, that is wonderful. But for those that don't know what the Two-Spirit term is, it's an Indigenous term that reflects the masculine and a feminine spirit in one's entity. And it also combines traditional cultural roles and responsibilities as well. And that's a whole nother presentation. But just very happy to be here today, and I'm going to turn it over to our last panelist here.
Thank you so much, and thank you everybody again for being here. I'm Rivolta Sata. I'm Halkalar Arawak from the Southern Sahara and the Eastern Amazon. And I'm very thankful for Jen for bringing me all the way here, 15 hours of flying, you know, the girls' side. Yes, and I've been working with Crushing Colonialism, not 2 years, as part of the Indigenous Queer Planning Council for the events that have been happening for DBIWP, as well as a performer and as well as a panelist during our events, and grateful to also be a panelist here. Yeah, most of my work and existence, I guess, is kind of Indigenous storytelling. The fact that I exist, especially in the society that I live in, that says that, which is completely a colonial imposed ideology that queer people, gay people, etc., don't exist in Africa. But so even that is a story in itself that people will tell about, especially when you're coming to speak at public panels, internationally, regionally, etc. Specifically with my work, I work with my body, and I work with sound, and I work with ancestral memory. This can translate into many different things. I like to play a lot with traditional music and drums, and then translate that into electronic music. But for my own organic expression, and the thing that feels most genuine to me, is making Indigenous punk rock music and metal music. So I play with these two things.
Great, wonderful. Thank you so much, y'all. So each of you work in different storytelling fields and community organizing. So I'd love to hear a little bit about how your work is advancing traditional Indigenous storytelling, because storytelling is a traditional value for our people. And I'd really love to hear particularly how it's helping and advancing our Indigiqueer relatives. And, you know, if there have been some challenges that you all have faced in this work, as well as, you know, some positives and some wins that you've had. Sure.
Yeah, I'll go first. When I was thinking about ways to answer these questions, as you can see, I'm not very much of a public speaker, but I thought about the best way to answer was telling a story. So I will answer this question with a small story about my life and my work. And one of the most important storytelling moments that I can ever think of that I participated. So, shortly before founding the press, Sob Influenza Press, Brazil went through an immense civil rights movement that took place between 2016 and 2017. I don't know if many of you, or if any of you are from Brazil or from Latin America and have experienced this moment in time that went through 2016 to 2019 in Chile. But we went through a large proportions, huge proportions civil wars movement in whole Abya Yala. But some of the organized Indigenous and Black groups aligned with our thoughts of liberation got together in São Paulo in 2016 to build a community squat in São Paulo, which is the largest city in Abya Yala, so-called Latin America. So as many of us were fighting every day in the streets during the acts, and this was through a span of more than a year, we lost jobs. We lost jobs, we lost our houses, and we lost our means of living during the general strike. So the general strike occupied the whole Brazil from north to south. So it was one of the largest strikes in Brazil history. And this squat was named Casa Mafalda. Casa Mafalda was home to more than 20 multi-ethnic people involved in the resistance and creating cultural agendas for those fighting in the streets, as well as free food programs and other actions. In this squat, we started also a small radio station and a print shop, a free print shop, where we could broadcast and resonate our struggles, but also improve on the education and distribution of knowledge, inviting people to talk, share, and learn more about the riots during the Civil Wars movement. So the city of São Paulo is very far from my birthplace, which is a reservation in the border of Brazil and Paraguay, as I said in the beginning, more than 17 hours from the city of São Paulo. It is also home for thousands and thousands of other indigenous people that are urban or that left their reservations to work in big cities just like me. Usually we see ourselves sadly far from our native cultures and our relatives and living on the marginalized space in Brazil and in the favelas. Most of us in the favelas don't even understand our indigenous heritage because we have a concept in Brazil that it's part of a colorization concept called pardo, which is a weird name that was brought to us, to indigenous people that are not part of their cultures. Casa Mafalda became home for me and for so many other indigenous relatives on the same conditions, and became a center of storytelling in the middle of the war. I see this experience as one of the most important storytelling resistance experience I've ever witnessed and took part of. And that being addressed, I wanted to address the challenges. That sounds amazing, but we had so many challenges. For sure, one of the most drastic difficulties is the severe systemically impoverishment that we went through and that we go through. We live this life creating, studying, teaching, learning, sharing, and nurturing, but almost no support comes our way. Our solid storytelling and knowledge, just like our land, is exploited, taken advantage of, and we barely see any means to continue living how we need to thrive and survive. We don't do storytelling as a practice or a commodity. The storytelling is a core part of how we live, is needed for our survival, is blood and backbone, though we see the exploitation of it every day of our lives. And it wasn't different in Casa Mafalda, that was brutally police attacked in the year of 2019 and completely dissoluted, leaving more than 20 families out in the open in the streets. I'm sorry that I put the vibe of the pen a little down. But it was amazing while it lasted. I'll pass to you, Elton.
Thank you. So storytelling amongst our communities, particularly here in the US, is essential to our way of life. It is our documentation of who we are as Native people of this land. When we were colonized, this concept of documentation was kind of introduced, written form, or the ability to write, the alphabet, were all kind of foreign to us at the time, because how we told our history was through storytelling, through generational descriptions and stories. So when we were colonized, this concept of documentation was kind of foreign to us, right? There were some tribes that were, quote unquote, a little bit more sophisticated, that had their own systems of writing. Per se, in Cherokee Nation is one of those tribes that had that distinguishment of being able to document their way of lives. But for a majority of us, it was through storytelling. And even the concept, I identified myself as Nagle, right? Which is our traditional term in Navajo for an effeminate male, someone who is two-spirit, right? And so even that term Nagle, it took me a while to understand for myself. And it wasn't until I was like in elementary school where a story of the separation of sexes amongst the Navajo people was told to me by my elder aunt, who kind of played my grandmother's role, right? And during this story, she told about the men and the women, and this is all done in Navajo. My aunt does not speak a word of English. Actually, I didn't speak a word of English until I went to formal school myself. But as a part of her story, she talks about the separation of sexes, meaning there was a conflict between men and women, and it was the less dominant, less masculine, more effeminate males that went and negotiated with the men to bring them back to the women, so we could procreate and become the largest tribe in the country. I say that jokingly with my Cherokee relative here. But it was the Nagle. It was the Nagle who were characterized as the negotiator, right? And then it was until a number of years, and that story was told to me by my great aunt, and it was until a number of years when I went to college that I read the same story by an anthropologist who studied the Navajo people. And at that time, it clicked in my head on how important my grandmother's or my aunt's words were to me in Navajo in letting me know about my identity as an ugly person. And then reading that from an anthropological point of view was affirming in a way, but it led me to come to the acceptance of my identity as an ugly person. And it was first by hearing the story that my elder aunt told me about the separation of sexes. And I said that within less than a minute, but that whole story can take at least 4 days to talk about. And these stories were only told during the winter time, when people were not outside because it was cold, but were in our traditional hogan, traditional home, which is called the hogan, that we would tell these stories. So the abridged version and the written one was very less descriptive. But needless to say, storytelling helped shape my own identity as an ugly person, as a gay male. And hence, learning a little bit more about the Nugle's role, it also involves ceremony. We have, in the Navajo culture, sacred ceremonies that happen in the wintertime. And as a part of that, Nugle individuals are given that opportunity by Creator to dance in these ceremonies, the opposite of what the gender they identify as, right? And so we have stories about male traditional dancers that dressed in female regalia, only because of that essence that we're seen to have as Nugle people, to have that, what I like to tell my non-native relatives is that magic, that cultural magic that we have. So we have that connection, and hence these roles were given to us in that way, in ceremony, and which are still practiced today, which is amazingly enough. And I'll talk a little bit more about later on in this discussion about my traditional understandings of my identity and how I incorporated that into drag performance, right? And kind of correlated the two in a way. So storytelling has been a part of my life growing up, and I still use it today. I guess I'm an elder now. I'm 51 years old, so people call me an elder. I was served first at a community event the other week, and I totally freaked out, like, why are you serving me first? And they're like, because you're an elder. I was like, oh my God. So being an elder comes that responsibility of storytelling, right? So I'm accepting that role as well. Hand it over to our next panelist.
Yes, thank you so much for sharing. I also want to follow up on what you spoke about Indigenous storytelling and how it's such a big part of our cultures. And I also come from a tribe that does not have any written form. So what we do use to express, we have a person in our communities who is the person who knows all of your family history. Anytime I can go back to my village, if someone doesn't immediately recognize me because I look very recognizable as who I am, they're like, what's your clan name? And then they're like, oh, this person was here from this village. It's like they have the best brains, no brain rot. I need to get on it. But like I can't remember what day it is. But they're like, this person from your family was just here, and like your great grandfather did this, and they also get invited to like weddings. So it's part of our culture that they get invited to weddings, and they're singing praises about you, about your family, about your history, about your entire lineage from the first person who stepped foot on the land there. So storytelling is such an integral part of our cultures that it's nothing that you can really separate. You couldn't anyway. We don't have a way of writing things. Only recently now people are writing in Arabic, but we are storytellers. This is our thing, and it happens organically where I guess being myself and I'm living inside of myself, I don't see how others would portray it, but it's very much every night when the sun is setting and everybody's eaten, where we all come and sit on the mat and we share our stories. But it seems like a very beautiful, amazing thing, but when you're kind of in it, it's just like, this is another Tuesday, but it's so interesting to see how people have this very interesting perspective of how beautiful and deep this is, which it is, but when you're in it, you're like, I'm tired and I want to go to sleep, and like, this is the same story that you've been telling me like the past 2 days, and like, when is this story gonna end? As an older, I'm not an elder, but maybe an older, I'm appreciating it because there's moments where I would be sitting in my grandmom's house, and then my family would be like, just sleep over, where I'm like, here. Gonna tell me another story, I'm never gonna sleep. Where I really appreciate it now, because I just feel like I learned so much about my culture and my history from sitting in these stories, where this is not stuff that you would find in any book. I mean, especially for our cultures, especially where I'm from, the Portuguese were the first people to come. So even for us, generally most people don't speak Portuguese in our country. So even if you're disconnected, or maybe you grew up somewhere totally different, it will be very hard to learn about our culture unless you speak Portuguese, which is not something that's frequent there. But Indigenous storytelling, I think, is so important, especially Indigenous queer storytelling, and for us to share our stories. Even sitting here today, I'm just like, I don't want to share my I want to listen to this amazing. I'm learning just so much about everything else happening in the world, and just having general conversations with other Indigenous queer people is just so beautiful, and to be able to share those, because then I'll go to another event and I'm like, wow, like I just learned these things, and just existing and sharing the good, the bad, the ugly, the weird, the strange, the funny. I think sharing these stories within ourselves and then bringing them back to our communities is something that's important, and documenting, which is great also what Crushing Colonialism is doing with the magazine. They have a magazine, shameless plug, Jen, you're welcome, to learn about these Indigenous queer stories, which I also write for as well. So it's a beautiful thing also to see how we've been doing things traditionally in the past, and what those look like now in, we are in 2025, what that looks like now, and how that changes. Just to talk, I guess, a bit more about my work and how I do that within my community is I spend hours a day just like looking at all of these like archive videos, recordings of sounds that we don't hear anymore, because people talk a lot about colonialism from European, the northern countries, Western countries, etc. But people don't talk a lot about the colonization between like warring tribes and like stronger tribes oppressing smaller tribes and things like this. And we have this with our languages, where generally in my region, most people speak Wolof but might not be Wolof. And this also translates to our stories, where I might be Halpular, but I'm making Balach music, which is Wolof music. And so most people, because they want to break into the larger scene, will make music that's not their traditional music. So we're losing a lot of our traditional sounds because we're trying to conform to this big capitalistic machine of music and entertainment. So really going back to our old music, bringing in the sounds even of our instruments into my music, and collaborating with traditional musicians who are still playing these sounds is something that's really important for me, and also something that a lot of people don't want to do, because in this age of how we operate, again, we're going back to how capitalism is like this pumping factory machine. And if you want to talk about entertainment, that's a long conversation. But like, people don't want to slow down to make the music that they want to make. They want you to make like every month EP album, da 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 da. And we're working on Indigenous time, okay? People, I mean, I don't know, I think I've been pretty good for these events, but I'm like, I am a late girly, proudly. But we're working really slow, and we're working with people who are just doing their thing. And especially when you're working with artists, musicians, and cultural holders, I feel like we are also living in our own kind of like time zone of the things that we find important. And then we're stuck here, and people are like, deadlines, timelines, be here. And you're just like, I'm trying to spiral into this like soundtrack for like the next 10 hours, but I got somewhere to be, where you really want to immerse yourself in a sound. So a lot of producers don't necessarily want to work with people that are working with traditional instruments or working in traditional sound, because this does take time. You want to work with a specific drum. A lot of the time, traditionally, we would stick the drum by the fire to warm the skin. And now you're like, okay, we have to bring this guy, and he's gonna need to do all of these things. We don't have time to do that. We want him to come in and record, and it's like, it's not how it works. Things do take time. So I try to make an effort to work with these musicians and bring that music electronically, or to sample it with rock music. And I always love to platform the amazing musicians from my community, queer or not, because all of this is amazing work. And you know, so yeah, this is kind of like what my part in the storytelling is looking at the sounds. And as a person that is West African and Amazonian, the drum is so integral to every part of our lives. It's how we communicate. It's how we notify someone's born. It's how someone dies. It's from the day you open your eyes in this existence from when you continue on. It's important. So I really enjoy storytelling through sound. Yes. Thank you.
So many wonderful things. And Elton, our two tribes, we're always, the last few years, we've been battling it out on who's the largest federally recognized tribe. So it's Cherokee Nation, Navajo Nation, who knows? So I do want to say, as we have established, we Indigenous folks can talk for a long time. We don't have a lot of time here, unfortunately. We're having to work on colonial time, not our time. And we do want to save a little time for a couple audience questions. But I wanted to ask, you know, we Indigenous queer people, we've existed on our lands much longer than Pride. You know, not just Pride as a concept, but Pride as celebrations and parades and all of this. But we've often been very excluded from these celebrations. I will say this WorldPride in particular has been quite supportive of Crushing Colonialism, which is a really good beginning step towards, you know, that reconciliation and decolonization. But this is a problem we still have within non-Indigenous queer communities and Pride celebrations and such. You know, in some instances, even Prides have often been openly hostile towards us, or worked with businesses and entities that are actively committing genocide against us. So I'd like to hear, briefly, why you all wanted to be here today. Like, what brought you here, knowing all of these things? You know, so what brought you here, and what keeps you engaged in this work?
Can you cut me off?
Sure.
I will start, but cut me off when you need to.
You got 2 minutes.
You calculate.
Oh, that's it.
I think something that I really find interesting, because we don't celebrate Pride in any of the places that I'm from. So I think sharing my story and sharing my people's story is extremely important. Not from Pride in a very celebratory, let's have a party, let's, you know, pop what, I don't know what people do. I don't go to the party parts that much unless I'm working. But I think taking it back to what the essence and the root of all of it is, as you said, this organization, this conference has been really good. It's working with us, but not even when we're talking about human rights. in general, supporting and platforming Indigenous voices is not something that's really working with the system and how things want to operate. So I think bringing Indigenous people, queer Indigenous people, into spaces to share the reality that it isn't all sweet, it isn't all like, let's dress up in rainbows and like glitter and like have a great time. Some of us are not able to exist openly in our countries, in our territories. So bringing it back to make sure that we're all sharing our stories on a platform like this, to the root of what it is. I mean, what happened with Jonathan Joss, I mean, even if you reach a high level of celebrity, queer Indigenous people are killed at such a massive rate. It's a genocide at this point. So that's why I feel like maybe I'm the, how do you say that? The dark cloud in the Pride events, to bring it back to the reality of it all, that it is a celebration, but how can you celebrate when you're walking across dead bodies? So like still having those conversations in the room, because it was kind of daunting to hear about Jonathan's death, and then to be here visiting this country at the same time on the beginning of this very happy, amazing celebratory Pride Month, of the reality of the situation of how things are. Sorry, is this 2 minutes? Should I stop? I'm gonna stop. Thank you so much. I'm like, I can go on. Please, I'll stop now.
Elton, would you like to answer next?
Yes, you know, you are right in saying that, you know, not every community has these celebrations of Pride, but at least in my experience, I think most times when we're working with organizations and prides and festivals, we're oftentimes tokenized, you know, and not necessarily, okay, we want to support your issues, we want to recognize your issues. And I think that happens in a number of circles with our community, is understanding being tokenized and what that means. And even for us as Indigenous people, you know, how do we work around that? You know, how do we not be wanting to be the ones with the feathers, you know, but rather the ones that come with critical issues, right? And I think, you know, and it's changing, but a lot of spaces are being intentionally inclusive, meaning that they're seeking out all rainbows of our flags, right? And making sure we're included. And this is just an example of that. And hopefully this will continue in that way. The land acknowledgement movement, right? You know, particularly here in the US, where land acknowledgements are being said at large gatherings, just to remind people that we still exist, you know, we still exist, and to be mindful on the lands that they're on, right? As someone who isn't an immigrant, right? You know, for me, that's the land that you're on. So having that space this morning and having Jen recognize our Piscataway relatives is truly important in that way. And then in queer spaces, opening that up even more to our Indigenous peoples, right? Using the term Two-Spirit is one way of doing that. Understanding the inclusiveness of using Two-Spirit also is also a good thing. But I'll go ahead and pass it on with Fabiana.
I wanted to tie this question with the last one real quick, that one thing about oral story and oral cultures in general is that we have to be alive. Registry is a colonizer tool that was introduced in our cultures in order to alleviate the burden of keeping us alive. So we have to be alive to tell our horror stories and our oral stories, oh my God. Sorry. And I just wanted to take this note that, you know, documentation and orality, they are one of the first storytelling battles that started with colonization, you know. And when we are here defending storytelling, but we are here actually defending our rights to live. And yeah, but now I'm gonna answer your question, sorry. Yeah, the question is, why are we here in Pride? And I struggled a lot with this question because I feel that I am where my people are resisting, and I'm where my people are creating this crazy imaginary ways to live and thrive, because we have to be very imaginative, yo. And So I think I'm not here for pride at all, and I'm here because my cousins are here. I'm here because my elders are here, and I'm here because of Jen and Elton, Rivolta, and all of you. And I celebrate our lives, and I take pride of being alive, and take pride of seeing Elton alive, take pride of seeing my elders alive. And yeah, I celebrate my Indigiqueer relatives' lives, and I celebrate my own. And that's what I'm proud of. And I'm proud of knowing that this conversation about our liberation doesn't end on this panel, but doesn't end at this Pride event, also continues through infinity. And most importantly, our liberation comes from our resistance, our survival, and our culture being held high. And beyond any ways that capitalism insists on commodifying and profits over our actions, or over the feathers on our heads, or over the beads on our wrists. Yeah, and I just wanted to bring a concept from the Yanomami tribes in Brazil. The concept is called mariterre. It's a beautiful concept that I grew up listening, even though I'm not Yanomami, but we are neighbor tribes. And mariterre is a concept that says that the dream that we dream together is more reality than reality that we live. And that's a beautiful culture. Thing about my culture is that when you wake up and you tell your mother your dreams, so your mother is able to tell your neighbors and people all over you that if you dream that someone is gonna get hurt, this person doesn't leave the house, you know. And talking with my partner, we have so many discussions in which he used to say, oh, my mom wouldn't let me go to this party because she said, oh, something's gonna happen to you. You know, you can go, but something's gonna happen to you. And it's funny, we hate this growing up, and it's, you know, cataclysmic in our heads. Oh my God, how come I can't go to this party because my mom dreamt something? But look at us dreaming about possibilities together. And mariterre is such a beautiful concept, because in the traditional paintings, mariterre is this beautiful bird that if you're a kid that imagines a lot, the bird comes for you at night and takes you to travel the world. And I'm so far from my land, and I feel like I was brought here by mariterres. I just wanted to say this because the dreams that we're sharing here, they're like, you know, gunpowder. And yeah, that's what I take pride on. These dreams of transformation.
Wonderful, thank you so much, everyone. So I know we're coming short on time, so we can open it up for maybe 2 questions. Yeah, 2 questions. Anyone in the room want to ask us anything? I see one hand up here.
Yeah, I wanted to know about Elton's feeling about the evolution of the two.
Hold on, please, the mic for the virtual.
I was just wondering about, you know, how you feel about the evolution of the two-spirit individuals' respect in the community and in society. Do you see a positive movement in that regard?
Yes, and thank you for your question. I'm sorry, the lights are right in my eye here. Yeah, thank you for your question. I am seeing a movement of positivity and acceptance by our younger Two-Spirit community. An example being that, you know, I barely accepted the term Two-Spirit like 5 years ago because it came with roles and responsibilities that I had to take on, and I felt like I needed to. And one of those responsibilities was me becoming sober, and that has reflected on the younger generation in a way that they're trying to understand their roles and responsibilities. And I was just told at a gathering recently that the younger folks are not ready to take on those responsibilities just yet, but they're culturally aware of who they are as Two-Spirit people. So they're wanting to coin their own term, which is more Indigiqueer, right? And so I feel like they're embracing that term for themselves until they're ready to become their Two-Spirit individuals. So I I personally see a resurgence of cultural identity in that way, and this terminology that we're using is indicative of that. You know, we're claiming ourselves with these terms that we have, right? So I'm seeing that movement happening in a positive direction for our young movement. And now that I'm an elder, I can tell them what to do. Thank you.
We have time for one more question.
Hi. Yeah. I work for a large multinational organization, and we keeping our indigenous talent employed and happy with what they're doing is always a challenge. And I'm just wondering, is there a way to incorporate storytelling and the oral tradition, which kind of runs entirely counter to sort of our capitalist tradition? Is there a way to take that oral tradition and use it for our employees in such a way that it makes it a more positive place for them to work?
Okay. Fabi, that's you, boss. So I'm gonna try to answer that, and I'll kind of use Crushing Colonialism as an example in some of the things that we have done. So in our storytelling practices in our organization, we've done it in many ways. We have supported our visual artists. Johnny J, for example, is an asexual Oto, Missouri, Choctaw artist, does a lot of different work, actually designed the scarf that you can get at 8th Generation, shameless plug, and she serves on our board, and she's designed some of our stickers and our t-shirts and things. We have the magazine that we run in English and Spanish. It's available digitally and in print. And in print, we actually distribute some copies for free to our relatives who are on the other side of the digital divide. And we work with those relatives on the other side of the digital divide to help them get published in our magazine. It takes a lot of community outreach and a lot of building with community. And I think that building with Indigenous community is the piece that a lot of non-Indigenous people miss in general. I think there's often this, you know, oh, we want you to come talk. We want to have someone come do a training. We want to hire an Indigenous person. But we are often a distrustful bunch because of our history and present. And so you really have to build, you have to be there, and you have to consistently keep showing up, you know? And you have to meet us where we're at, because that's really important. There is this bar up here of what is considered where everyone should be in terms of professionalism or, you know, employability and such. And we've not always been able to get to that bar, you know? Some of us don't have internet. Some of us don't have running water. Some of us are out here trying to find our murdered and missing relatives, you know? Some of us would like to be paid, but also can't lose Medicaid, you know? So I think it takes a lot of work, just not only to build that community with us, but to also help us be able to do these things. You know, bringing some of our relatives in here to this country, not everyone had a credit card, you know? So when we set up hotels for folks, we said, okay, no credit cards have to be required for check-in. And I know I'm maybe not quite answering your question, but I hope I'm also answering your question by giving these examples, you know, of how you can get us in the door, how you can work with us, how you can grow with us. And that really does mean you gotta meet us where we are at, and you have to take that time to get to know us and just keep showing up, because we will pay attention and we will notice when this person keeps showing up and they're not always coming with their hands out, you know, trying to ask and take from us, but rather to give and support and build with us. I think that's the way that you bring us in to your organization or any other space and organization. I feel like that was a very long-winded answer. I hope that was okay. I feel like I've not had enough coffee and yet I've had too much coffee. So I think we're probably at time now. Yeah, it's 12:20. Okay. So unfortunately, I would love to keep this conversation going, but you know, colonial time, we can't. So I just want to say thank you to you all for being here in this room with us. You know, and I want to encourage you all to engage in our work for each of the people here in your own local Indigenous communities from wherever it is that you live. But also I want you to engage in the work of Crushing Colonialism. You can follow us on social media at Crushing Colonialism. You can sign up for our e-newsletter on our website, crushingcolonialism.org. You can also go read the magazine, or La Revista, as it is named in Spanish. You can also subscribe to it. And of course, we couldn't do all this work if we didn't have the support of y'all. So if you were someone who was able to make a donation, please do so on our website. And while you're there, make it a monthly donation. And so also, you can reach us at info@crushingcolonialism.org, and we actually have a kiosk in the community hub where you can go get merch, you can talk to us some more, learn more about us. And on all of the tables, we put some stickers and postcards and things out, so please take those, because those are for all of you. So I guess that's it for us for now. Thank you.